Alright, good morning everybody. This is Stinky. I guess this is video number 3 for the day. Just kind of went through the last one that I recorded was the tournament video that I played in. Alright, let's go Cards and Castles. Was the tournament video that I played in. Obviously, that was probably my worst recording. I'm not very happy with the way that it turned out, but I gotta throw it up since I put a tournament video in there. Oh, don't be this way. Alright, we're gonna try this again. So again, I'm not very happy with the way that the last video turned out. But it is what it is, I guess. You know, you can't win them all, and you know, sometimes things don't work out in your favor. Like sometimes Cards and Castles decides not to load, which is really gonna kind of put a fucking cramp in my style here. Let's go. Okay, finally, we're in. I was about to scrub the recording, but some of the things that I want to continue to post on this channel, I want to post a lot of gameplay videos where I just kind of go through, I play some of the decks that I built, that kind of stuff, highlight them, you know, talk about some important concepts in the games, as well as you know, stuff like how to position your units, when to attack, what spells to play at what time, and trying to maximize the cards that you do have. You're really limited as far as what you can include in your deck in order to make it actually reasonably consistent. So, kind of running through some games there, and the more games I post, the more the concepts are going to be able to sink into everybody. I also got, as I touched on in the last video, I've also got some requests to walk through some of the campaigns as well. I walked through a couple of them. A lot of these have changed, and from what I understand, they're working on a single-player revamp. At least they should. So they're working on a single-player revamp as well as adding some more campaigns and stuff like that. I mean, look how much room we have for campaigns. All the room. So I don't really want to touch on those right now. If something's really a problem for people, like I went over the obstacle course in the last video, and they made that a billion times easier than what it used to be. It used to be almost impossible unless you got a lucky god draw there. So they went and changed it. They made those a lot easier. I imagine they did that with some of the other campaigns as well. So kind of wanted to highlight that. But then the most requested thing that I get is for deck building and how to do that properly, and what to do, what cards to add, what factions to pick, what's good, what's bad, how do you build a good deck. So just to kind of throw a disclaimer in here, I'm not the best at deck building. I've built some really solid stuff, but there's room for improvement. Like this deck is really solid, my burn deck here. Other decks that I've built that are pretty solid. Most of these I just kind of threw together. This is the one that I use for rank 1. It's pretty solid, but it doesn't do anything special. Just to kind of flip through here, a lot of these are just stuff I threw together. There's my auto build deck. That doesn't count. This deck is really good. I'm surprised nobody tried to replicate this yet. Let's see here. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have a whole heck of a lot of decks. I mean, this deck is good in theory, bad in practice. So let's just kind of scrap this one. And I kind of want to highlight some key concepts when looking at deck building. And keep in mind, building a deck for constructed is different than building a deck for draft. So I've got my handy dandy pen out here, and I'm going to kind of highlight some features. So sorry if I bog people down with some drawing, but I'm going to do that anyway. So one of the important concepts as far as building a deck is, and you hear this term a lot, is playing on curve and making sure that your curve is right. So what do they mean by curve? And I'm going to highlight that here. I got my little notepad set up. So generally speaking, you're going to have your spells listed out here as far as cost goes. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, keep in mind that my art skills are just the worst. So, sorry if I bog you guys down with some of this stuff, and I don't want to erase these numbers here. So, I'm going to open up my little pen thing. Alright. So I've got my little pen that I can do as well here to just to kind of highlight some important stuff. All right. So when they say on curve, generally speaking, the curve is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit here. So as far as archetypes for decks, which is, you know, your the type of deck you're building, there's aggro, which is your aggressive. There's mid-range, which is going to kind of be there in the middle. And then there's control, which is probably on this end of the spectrum. So these decks are all going to have different curves that work best for them. And again, I'm just kind of trying to highlight the concepts here. There's people that are better at this than I am. One thing that I found in Cards and Castles is the curve. It's important, but it's not as important as in other games like Magic the Gathering, because there's a little bit more randomness and there's a lot better selection. But building a deck on curve is going to help a lot. So here's some of the things that I want to highlight. The curve for aggro, the ideal curve, is going to be different than the curve for mid-range, which is going to be different than the curve for control. Every one of them has a different ideal curve. So let's kind of touch on those for a second. We're going to touch on the aggro here. Oops. Aggro. And again, sorry my art skills are not so great. So when you're playing an aggressive deck, ideally you want to win fast. Alright? That's the goal of what aggro decks try to do. They try to be aggressive, beat your face in before they're going to get killed. Factions that are good for aggro are things like warlocks, where they focus on just getting your decks dead, your opponent's dead as quickly as possible, just making you dead. So the curve, as far as the units that the things that you want to have in your deck, it's going to curve out something like this. And again, my art skills are not so great here. So you want to have the bulk of your cards, and this is kind of number of cards up this side, and this is kind of cost down here. So your curve is going to kind of work out like this. You want a lot of early game pressure, and the idea is you want to kill your opponent before they get a chance to use any of their stuff over here that's going to be more powerful, because you're not going to have a lot of options down over here. You're going to have a ton of options and flexibility over here. So getting your opponent dead by about right here is really going to be the goal, or have so much control over what's going on in the game and really beating their face that no matter what they play in this late game, they're going to lose because you've got so much pressure. That's the idea with an aggro deck. Things like warlocks, ninjas, warlocks, pirates, warlocks, pretty much anything. Maybe Warlock Crusaders is going to be a little bit more in the mid-range. We'll touch on that in a minute. But getting your opponent dead as quickly as possible is the idea of an aggro deck. Keeping the pressure on, maintaining the initiative in the tempo until you win the game. The way to beat a strategy like this is defending properly. Once you take the initiative back from an aggro deck, it's almost impossible for the aggressive player to get that initiative back. So just to kind of touch on the curve here, things that are going to let's get rid of this. And again, sorry my art skills are inferior, but like Soulless, Burn, you know, in the 3 spot you might have something like you know, Faithful Drake. In the 4 spot, maybe Stalker, that kind of stuff. Just to Mikuru, another one. You know, just to stack up on the stuff, on the spells that are going to be in this 4 slot to make it. Oops, I got rid of my pen. Just to make it, you know, make your early game good. And you're probably going to have a couple of these over here, but not a lot. These are kind of your finishers after you have all the tempo. So it's probably going to be something like this is what your credit curve. It's going to be very, very heavy on the early game, and this is for an aggro. deck here. So to kind of touch on the next one here, we're going to go with mid-range. You might have heard these terms thrown around before, but this is the kind of the curve that you're going with for a mid-range deck here. Something like this, where, and again, this is not, my art skills aren't that great. It's probably going to be something closer to this. You know, this being down at like 0 here, it's probably going to be like this. It's probably closer to that. Just to kind of keep the balance, but you really want to focus your maximum pressure in the middle here. So really value plays anywhere from, let's get rid of those arrows. Sorry about the drawing, guys. But you're going to want to get your maximum value in between this 3 and really this 6 is probably going to be your mid-range target here. Things like Faithful Drake are good. Things like Knight of the Flowers. Things like Swordsman. That kind of stuff are going to be what your mid-range deck focuses on. Really just kind of making your opponent, you know, either have to gas out really early to try to catch you, or to really maintain the initiative before the control decks have an opportunity to shine. Really focusing on this mid game and creating as much damage as you can in this mid game as fast as possible, and really just getting enough pressure on your opponent where it doesn't really matter what they do, but at the same time trying not to get killed in the early game as well. So you need to pay attention to where you're at there, and just try to lay the beat down. It's generally you're gonna get some guys that you're gonna buff them up a little bit, and you're gonna smash face at your opponent's base, where the control decks are gonna focus a little bit more on killing you. So let's kind of touch on control here. Let's get rid of all this stuff. Now, control in a standard trading card game, a control deck is going to curve out something like this, usually. So you're going to have a lot of late game stuff, that kind of stuff. But from what I find, and even in my experience in like Magic the Gathering and stuff like that, your control decks are going to curve out more like this. More like that. Where their middle game is going to be pretty weak. And they're going to have a reasonable amount of early game, but the early game cards that they include are going to be things like Slice and Dice. Right? They're going to be like Dirty Job. It's going to be like Shield Knight. Or it's going to be draw spells like Dragon Lore. You know, things to build cards on their hand to get the options and make sure they don't get killed. This is generally how I like to play this game, and I think is the most effective. I like the control strategies a little bit better. You know, keeping, you know, yourself not getting killed in the early game. Don't play a whole heck of a lot of middle game pressure, and then just beat face in the end game. Because what control decks do is they want to drag the game out as long as possible. And then just overwhelm you with late game pressure that you just won't have answers for in the rest of your deck. Things like Legionnaire, Draymoth, Earth Knight are all good choices for late game in a control deck. Obviously, other decks are going to have some stuff over here like the Ranger, Rakanoth, Craxus over here, that kind of stuff. But the control decks are really going to focus heavier on the late game units and spells, where aggro decks are going to focus on the early game and mid range is going to focus on the middle game. So that's kind of ideally what you want to focus on in this game. In Cards and Castles specifically, the curve doesn't I mean, it matters, but it's not as important as, you know, Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, that kind of stuff, because with the addition of the board, is really the key difference here. Because with the addition of the board, you can sacrifice a little bit as far as your curve goes if your positioning is on point. Here's the point. If your positioning is right on that guy right there, then you can sacrifice a little bit of focus on the curve with making sure that your positioning is accurate, and that'll help kind of mitigate some of the advantages. Or if you're trying to shove in a couple extra heavy units in an aggro deck, you can focus on some of the positioning in the early and mid game to get the value out of these. Where if you're playing a game like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering that doesn't have this board state, you're really gonna sacrifice a lot by including these when you should be throwing in more of these. So that's kind of the idea here. So that's kind of touching on the curve a little bit. So let's kind of focus on what kind of deck I want to build. I kind of want to focus on really some of the easier decks to build. I'm going to go with a mid-range. We're going to go mid-range. Viking, Crusader, and I think that's what I'm going to focus on for this video. Obviously, this deck is going to be good against some builds. It's going to be bad against some other builds. So I'm going to build this deck here on camera in this video and play a couple games with it in the next one that I post. So, alright. So let's head back to Cards and Castles now that I've explained that, the archetypes as well as curve and what that means. So, let's get our deck ready to go here. And the thing that you need to remember is I'm going to put this deck together, and I'm going to put a lot of thought and reasoning into every single card that I'm putting into this deck, but I'm still going to make some mistakes. You're not really going to know how good your deck is until you play it a bunch of times. You can throw together a deck, post on the forums, be like, here's a great deck that I built. You know, let me know what you guys think. But if you don't have any games with it, you're never really going to know. So I'm not really going to know how great this deck is until I play 10, 20 games with it. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to make changes to it and really make it shine. So I don't really want to focus on throwing a ton of legendaries in here, but I don't want to ignore them either. So it's really about finding a balance. I don't want to throw them all in here, but I don't want to play none. Usually when I build a deck, I start with the buildings. The buildings are the smallest category of cards. So throwing in the buildings first really helps me get a good idea of what I really want to do. So, and I usually start at the top and move my way down. So how do I want this deck to go? Do I want to play stables? No. Tower of Ice, I don't want to play. Tower of Terius, I never want to play. Temple of the Five Gods? No, I don't want to play that either. Library, no. Dragon Temple? Maybe. Yeah, let's put in Dragon Temple. Armory. No. Hall of Winds, definitely not. Crumbling Archive, potentially. Courthouse, potentially. Church, no. Brewery, potentially. School of Knowledge, no. Cold Geyser, no. Pillar of North, absolutely not. Alright, then I usually start with the units, and again, I start at the top. And again, this is just how I build my decks. I throw in a bunch of stuff, and then I take stuff out. But we're going to focus on kind of a mid-rangey. I don't want to play Dreymoth because he doesn't really do enough. The Ranger's really good, so let's play him. The Legionnaire, I don't think you really need him for this deck. Joan Vive, I can't play. Lionel's really useful. Earth Knight, I don't think I need him. Craxus, yup. Swordsman, yup. Ragnar, yup. Decision time. Maybe both. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Aeroth, yup. If I'm really going Dragon Temple, I'm going Aeroth. Knight of Flowers over Sentry Golem, I think, in this deck is going to be beneficial. Cleric, nope. Paladin, definitely nope. Lord Master Terius, yup. Master of Arms, yup. Ice Drake, yup. Dragon Knight, yup. Faithful Drake, yup. Alright, so you may have noticed here, my deck's full. Whatever will I do? Well, now I got this fancy little analyzer down here on the bottom that says how many cards of what type of structure I have here. I wish it showed spells as well, but it doesn't. It would make it a little bit easier so you don't have to do the old mental math. So I have no spells yet, and I've got 22 units. I probably want to scale that down to 16 to 18 units. And there's still a couple of things I'd like to add. So what don't I need? The first thing that's sticking out to me is these 6-drops. I mean, look how many I have. And I also have a lot of early drops. I could probably get away with cutting some stuff here. I'm going to cut Crumbling Archive. I don't think I need it. Berserker, yup. Alright, Rat King and Flying Books are, I think, the other units that I want to play. Alright. So again, keep in mind, we're kind of focusing on Dragon Temple a little bit here. But I also want to not get killed and be able to throw some pressure down. So, cards that are sticking out to me to remove are going to be actually both Monk and Barbarian, honestly. Okay, I've got room for one spell. Obviously, this is not the final structure. We're focused pretty heavy on the early game here. I mean, we've got 7 2-drops, 6 3-drops, 5 4, 7 4-drops, and the middle game is kind of lacking over here a little bit, and then it kind of goes into the end game. So this is built a little more like Control, and that's not really what I'm shooting for here, so I need to axe some of these early drops. I think I'm going to cut the Brewery. I know I say play this card all the time, but I don't think it's really necessary in this deck. Not if I'm really going to focus heavy on Dragon Temple. The Courthouse I would like to play. Actually, I don't even think I need it. I'm going to cut the Courthouse too. Alright, we're gonna look at this right now. Alright, let's go to the spells. Again, I start at the top. Alright. I really like to play one of those. Definitely 2 of those. I like one of these. Blade of Light, no. Battle Training, no. No. Gungnir, no. Eternal Life, no. Wind Weapon, no. The Verdict, ugh. Maybe. Holy Grail, maybe. Rally the Town. Okay. Cut that. Maybe. Dragon Taming, yup. Master of Arms can go. And we're going to go with Dragon Lore. Alright, I kind of like this. It's solid, it does its job. And let's look at the curve here. Alright, so I've got 1-drops, I've got 1, 2, 2-drops, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, 3-drops, I've got 1, 2. Oh, wait a minute. 2 drops. I already messed up. 2-drops, I've got 1, 2, 3. 3-drops, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 4-drops, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright. Alright, now I need to scroll. Shit. Alright, I got 2, 3, 8, 5. Alright. Right? Yeah. So. Whoops. Sorry, guys. Alright, so we've got 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, 4-drops. Alright, how many 5s? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many 6s? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many 7s? 3. 8s, none, 9, 1. Alright. So look at the focus on the early game. Alright. So in really the middle of the game is where I have the vast majority of my stuff. I've got some support stuff early and a little support stuff at this 3 spot, but most of my damage potential is going to be here really in the middle. Like this area right here is where most of the damage is going to come from in my deck. So control decks that have you know, they have the Ranger, you know, maybe Legionnaire here, maybe some Mercenaries up here, that kind of stuff. They're going to be focused more on the late game, maybe Dreymoth as well, that kind of stuff, where early decks are going to have more stuff over here, like Lumberjack and Bear, Warrior, that kind of stuff, to really put the pressure over there. But since I've got these cards here in the middle, that's really what I'm going to be focusing on here. So again, this is the deck that I built. Obviously I have no way of knowing if this is really going to be effective or not, and what the outcome of this deck is. Obviously I didn't want to just throw in all the legendaries. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whoops, 6. Well, I did a bad job. I got 6 of them in here, but this is the deck that I like. Some of these cards could probably be removed, like Lionel, if it's only in there in case, you know, shit hits the fan, where I could probably throw something like Sentry Golem in here and it would fit just fine. You know, Ragnar, I don't really need him either. I could replace him with something else. I actually think this deck is a little bit too heavy on the units. And I think I am going to tweak it a little bit now that I'm kind of analyzing it a little bit. What do I have in here that I think would be better? I think this deck is too heavy on units, and I need a couple more useful spells. I mean, what looks good? What are we thinking, guys? Fist of the Ancient Hero is really useful. Lightning Bolt, Might of the Minotaur is really useful. Right, the Peasants is really useful. Alright, we're going to cut Lionel for the Verdict. So, alright, this is what I like. Maybe I'll regret that decision, but I'm going to go ahead and post this. And then I'm going to play a couple games in the next video. This ran a little bit long, I'm sure. So I'll post a couple games in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Like, comment, subscribe, share my video. Make sure everybody watches it. And I'll see you in the next one when I play a couple games with it. Take care. Bye.